Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We have with us Kathy Sinback. She's the Juvenile Court Administrator here in Davidson County, and we're talking about juvenile justice in the state and certainly here in Davidson County. We've been talking about it in a series of reports that our Investigates team has been doing all throughout the month of November, and certainly Kathy Sinback's on the front lines here in Davidson County and has been in several of our reports. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Edward. Hello, Edward?
Yes.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Okay. If you go back and you check all the juvenile crime that we have now, and you go back and check the years going back, and you realize that parents can't be parents no more because they have got the system tied up so bad that I know when I was growing up and when I was real little, I had to go out and get a switch. My mother made me go out and get a switch off the tree, but she let me think about what I'd done before I had to go get the switch. I went and got a switch. She tapped my legs a little bit with a switch to let me know, hey, you don't do that again. That's wrong. You don't do that. Now, I know some kids that might be, mentally not right. It might not work on them. But not all the kids are not mentally, have a bad problem.
You think parents are afraid to discipline or are
right.
just not? You think parents?
They can't discipline no more because now, if they discipline a kid, they're going to end up in court. And then you went to school and you acted up in school, you had corporal punishment.
Right.
In other words, that you had to face the principal if you caused a problem in school. And then they called your house and told your mother or daddy, hey, your kid acted up in school. And then you got another whipping again when you got home.
All right, well, let's talk about that. All right, thank you. I appreciate that, Edward. So you hear what he's saying there, that we're afraid to discipline. Parents are afraid to discipline. In essence, we've kind of gone soft. But do you see that? What do you think about what he's saying?
I don't hear from parents very often that they are afraid to discipline their youth. I think that most of the time they get to a point where they just feel like their youth are unsafe in their home, and so they're just at a loss. And so they'll come in and say, I don't want to take my child home because I feel like he's going to go out and do something, or he's going to get shot. They're really afraid, more than feeling like they're not able to discipline their children. They don't know how to. And so when you have a child, especially an older child, who is 16 years old and twice as big as you, a lot of times, corporal punishment is, not always shown to be the most effective type of punishment, especially with older youth. And so I think there is just a lack of understanding of how do we interact with our youth in a way that is going to be effective.
Okay, let's go to Tony. Hello, Tony.
Hey.
Go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What's on your mind?
Well, the last thing she said, 16 years old and twice as big as me. Some of these youths are pretty big, and they're causing a lot of crime. And I was saying maybe we should clamp down on it, clamp down the crime, and then we can sort out all the social issues later. I don't know. What do you think about that? Should we clamp down on the really violent crime and the carjackings and murders, and then maybe sort out the social issues later?
Clamp down on it, sort out social issues later. What about that?
So I think that you can't clamp down on it without addressing the social issues. So when we talk about what do we do with the children who are committing the most serious crimes, so the caller was talking about the carjackings, the murders, very serious crimes. The youth who commit the more serious crimes but do not get transferred to the adult system, those children end up in the Department of Children's Services custody. And that is a program that is supposed to be for treatment and rehabilitation. And that's for the youth that we still think have a chance to be able to be rehabilitated and return safely to the community. And so we can't, when we are treating and rehabilitating those children, we have to address the social issues. We can't just, we don't by state law just lock them up like we do adults. We don't just punish them. In fact, our whole state law and juvenile court says that the purpose of it is treatment and rehabilitation, and to remove the taint of criminality wherever possible so that our youth can become members of our community and can be productive members of our community. So the idea is ultimately to try to get them back in the community without a felony record that's going to keep them from ever having a positive source of income. And so we do at some points have to clamp down, and many of those homicides and those serious crimes end up in the adult system, where kids are looking at sentences up to life without parole in Tennessee for youth who, as young as 12 in Nashville, have been transferred to the adult system. And so we do clamp down, but we can't ignore those social issues, and especially for those youth that we're keeping in the juvenile system. That's what it's all about, is how do we get them back safely into our community. But I appreciate the caller's concern about those serious crimes, because it is something that we all fear.
Let's go to Marilyn. Hello, Marilyn.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
The way I see it is that our children are suffering and acting out from the ills and failures of the adult world. I heartily disagree and reject the idea and the perception that most of the crime, the hard crime on juveniles, is happening in certain areas. It is not. What these children are having a problem with is the injustice that is meted down on people in the neighborhoods, in the lower income neighborhoods, when we all know that crime happens in all income neighborhoods. But the unfairness that these children are experiencing when it comes to their crime in comparison to the same crime that's happened to someone in maybe a higher income neighborhood, they get jaded. They are upset. Everybody should be upset. The main thing we can do to help these children is give them a fairness in our court systems. Make them feel like they're not going to be treated any different than anybody else. And that's not just for the lower income kids, that's also for the criminals in the higher income neighborhoods that feel like they're entitled and they can get away with stuff, and they do more too.
The unfairness. Okay, thank you, Marilyn. What do you think about what she's saying there?
I think that all of the research shows that there is a correlation between some of the social structures that we have in our society, many of which did not treat African Americans fairly as they were being developed, that those lead directly to the problems that we're having today, the social ills, the educational disparities, the disparities in the criminal justice system. And I do think that youth are very perceptive, and young people do feel injustice very deeply. When we talk to our kids in detention, they do talk a lot about how they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake in life, that they feel like they started out with the fair hand. And so we had a project a few days ago where some youth were writing on they were doing a poster with some of their hopes and dreams, some of our youth who have been court involved. And one of them wrote, "I dream of a day when black families can live like white families." And I just looked at that, and it just, it really hits you in the heart. And you see, our youth are not seeing a fair community. They're not seeing a community where they have the same opportunities as their more affluent peers. And, kids don't ask to be born into poverty. Kids don't ask to be born into situations with trauma and violence and, lack of economic opportunity. But they end up where they end up. And what we can do is help them build those resiliency factors so that they can really have a chance to live a happy life.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Thank you for that call, Marilyn. Let's go to Nicole. Hello, Nicole.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hi. Okay. I talk to people about this all the time with my friends. The problem we keep coming up with, the answer is these kids need consistent parental guidance. And you can't start that middle ways of childhood, teenage years. You've got to start that as soon as that child can understand mama and daddy. You just can't do it. These kids are in school, and I work in the school system, and I see it. I'm in middle school, high school, and elementary. It is sad to see a child get to middle school, and I'm not talking about any mental kids that have mental problems. Kids that can do, get in high school, and you're supposed to be in 11th or 12th grade and cannot spell simple words, cannot start a sentence with a capital letter.
Wow.
Kids that are fighting and can hit teachers and get a slap on the wrist and sent back to class. So it's not just the parents not disciplining their kids or teaching their kids and showing them how to act, not just at home, but without the presence of their parents. They go to school and do the same thing, and then the same thing is being perpetrated at the schools.
Right.
And then we turn these kids into teenagers, into adult criminals. It doesn't take a scientist, a rocket scientist, to figure that these kids will end up in the system and will stay there.
All right, thank you.
You have got to parent your kids.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. What about that?
I think, well, I really applaud Nicole for working in the school system. That is one of the most difficult jobs, and especially, with the youth in Nashville having such high levels of adverse childhood experiences in some of our schools, and really coming into that educational environment without the skills that they need, often getting into middle school and getting expelled because their behavior is not up to par. When we realize that they are at the same time can't read, and we see that the frustration is building and the resentment, and it's all interrelated, and then what does the teacher do about that? I think it's a very frustrating conundrum, and it's something that I think we all need to continue to work on to support these parents, to provide them with whatever they're entitled to through, like I said, the TANF funds and different programs to help people who are trying to better themselves through work, to help support them.
Are you hopeful these TANF funds are going to make a difference? Obviously, there's a large amount of money that hasn't been spent. The state is now saying they're going to spend it. Have you heard how they may spend it, and are you hopeful it's going to help?
I have not heard the details on the plan, but I am hopeful. I think anytime we have a large pot of money that can be used to help poor working families, I think that goes a long way towards addressing juvenile delinquency. I see a lot of our juvenile offenders that their situations are affected by homelessness, poverty, lack of affordable housing. They're moving from school to school often. A lot of times the kids that may have behavioral problems are popping up in a new school because they've had to move, and the new school doesn't know how to deal with them. They don't know their trauma history or what this child's been through, and they're trying to do the best they can to deal with a child with a behavioral problem, but it all goes back to a lack of stability and security that we could be helping with.
Let's take a break. We will take a break and take another phone call after that. Be back right after this.